the City of Huntington Woods to order. Today is Tuesday, December the 3rd, 2019. It's 7:30 p.m. If you'd all please join me as we say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next up we'll have roll call. Commissioner Elder.
Present.
Commissioner Olsman.
Here.
Commissioner Jenks.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Roselle is present. Mayor Paul is absent and is excused from this evening. Next item is approval of this evening's agenda. We are going to remove items 7 and 8. Those will be moved to our January meeting. So if I could get a motion to approve this evening's agenda with the removal of items 7 and 8.
So move. Second.
Moved by Commissioner Jenks, seconded by Commissioner Olsman. Questions on that? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is our consent agenda with a number of minutes and the warrant. There were a couple of new sets of minutes placed at everybody's desk so that you've had an opportunity. Those were also sent out by email. I'll look for a motion on the consent agenda.
So move.
Seconded.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Jenks, seconded by Commissioner Elder. Any questions on the consent agenda? All right, hearing none, we'll remove no items and we'll move on the consent agenda. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. County Commissioner and elected official remarks. I do not see any of our elected representatives with us this evening, so we'll skip that. Next item is public participation. This is an opportunity for anybody from the public who wishes to address the commission on an item that's not on our agenda. Does anybody want to address the commission on an item not on our agenda? All right, seeing no hands, we'll close public participation and we'll move on to proclamations. We have 2 proclamations this evening. The first proclamation is recognizing Gilda Jacobs' induction into her story, the Women's Hall of Fame. And I'll just read the proclamation as traditionally our mayor does. It says, whereas Gilda Jacobs has been a resident of Huntington Woods for more than 45 years, whereas Gilda was the first woman elected to the Huntington Woods City Commission in 1981, whereas Gilda was elected to the Oakland County Commission in 1995, then served 2 terms in the House of Representatives, followed by 2 terms in the Michigan Senate, whereas Gilda serves as a CEO of the Michigan League for Public Policy, which is focused on promoting racial equality, economic security, health, and well-being for Michigan residents, whereas Gilda was inducted into Her Story Women's Hall of Fame on November the 7th, 2019, for the work she's done to benefit children in economically vulnerable families, and now therefore be it resolved that the City of Huntington Woods City Commission congratulates Gilda Jacobs on her recent induction and are proud to recognize her as an outstanding resident of Huntington Woods, proclaimed at the regular City Commission meeting of December the 3rd, 2019. Our next proclamation on the agenda is a matter of recognizing Jamie Powell Horowitz Wings of Justice Award. And this proclamation I'll read, whereas Jamie Powell Horowitz is a resident of Huntington Woods, whereas Jamie serves on the City of Huntington Woods Ethics Committee, and whereas Jamie serves as a Wayne County Assistant Prosecutor working in the Homicide Unit and Elder Abuse Unit, whereas Jamie is currently in private practice, and whereas Jamie was honored at the Phil Hart Dinner with the Wings of Justice Award on November the 16th, 2019, whereas the Wings of Justice Award is presented to an individual for their activism and advocacy on behalf of social order and or racial justice and civil and human rights. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Huntington Woods City Commission congratulates Jamie Powell Horowitz on her recent award and are proud to recognize her as an outstanding resident of Huntington Woods, proclaimed at the regular City Commission meeting of December 3rd, 2019. I know Jamie and your husband are here tonight. Anything you'd like to say?
I just wanted to thank the city for its acknowledgement. I'm truly humbled.
Thank you. Do you want to do a photo? All right. You'd like to step up here?
Another plaque for the wall, huh?
You know, I have a better, Bob hasn't signed it.
Okay, we'll use it. It's got to call it more. Yeah, the official.
Don't stop, wait a minute, there's another photographer in the room.
Excellent. Thank you. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Okay, that concludes proclamations on this evening's agenda. The next item is a public hearing. It's a matter of public comment on the proposed use of $8,797 allocated to the City of Huntington Woods under the Community Development Block Grant for 2020. I'm going to go ahead and declare the public hearing open at 7:37. Is there anyone that wishes to address the commission at this public hearing? Okay, seeing no hands, then I'll declare the public hearing closed at 7:38, and we'll move on to our items of business. First item on the agenda is a resolution, matter of consideration to approve the notice of intent resolution for general obligation capital improvement bonds. Can I get a motion on this item?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Jenks, seconded by Commissioner Olsman. I know we have counsel in the audience, and Amy, if you could just give a real brief explanation on this item.
Sure. For the upcoming sewer work, the last phase of the sewer work, and if the Public Act 345 passes, the road work that would result from that, we're going to sell bonds, and they're going to be general obligation bonds. And so in order to do that, we need to give the residents a minimum of 45 days notice of our intent to sell those bonds. So if there are any objections to it, a petition can be filed and taken up by the city commission. So this is the notice of intent resolution for the general obligation capital improvement bonds, and is directing the city clerk to publish the notice.
Okay, great. Anything you want to add?
Amy pretty much
Summed it up?
Right up. I'm happy to answer.
Okay, all right, thank you. Appreciate that. Any members of the public with any questions on this? Seeing no hands, members of the commission have any questions on this? All right, hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is, yeah.
Good luck. I know.
Right,
Can I-
and a quick trip home, right?
Yes.
That's
Can I
right.
ask who made the motions? I'm sorry.
It was moved by Commissioner Jenks and seconded by Commissioner Olsen.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for attending, just in case. You're welcome. Next item is the 2018-2019 financial statements, a matter of accepting the financial statements as presented by the city's auditor, our certified public accountants. So I know that they typically make a presentation. Is it going to be PowerPoint? Okay, so I'll step aside then, and if you can.
So we have Aaron Stevens here from Manor Custodian. He's going to give a presentation on our financials. We'll be happy to answer any questions from the commission.
Okay, great. So we'll let you present, and then we'll go ahead and entertain a motion then and take public comment at that time.
For PowerPoint?
In addition to the PowerPoint, I also passed out tonight a handout. What I found is that rather than go through the 140-odd some page report, it's sometimes easier to pull out excerpts and put it into a presentation packet. It helps facilitate the presentation and helps you follow along because I start to talk fast. So, but a couple of general comments before I get to the presentation. Our thanks to Tim, Jamie, and the rest of the city staff for their courtesy, cooperation, and assistance. Obviously, this is our first year here, and so we have the typical bumps and bruises, but I thought the process went very well, very smoothly. We are still in a draft version of this. There were a couple of things that we didn't have until, actually one of those things didn't come in this week, until this week, and one came in last week. So we now have everything we need to wrap this up, but it was kind of too late for the presentation. So these are still draft versions, and if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer those as we go. But I plan to highlight what I think are the key areas. That's me, Aaron Stevens with Maynard Costerison. I plan to highlight what I think are the key areas, but if you have questions, stop me at any time. We can go through those. Pages 21 and 22 of the bound report make up the independent auditor's report. So this is our report on your financial statements. And I always like to remind everyone when I present an audit that the purpose of the audit is not to detect fraud or give you an opinion on your internal controls. The purpose of the audit is to express opinions on the financial statements. Now, if we found fraud or if we have recommendations on how to improve your internal controls, we will certainly tell you about that. We have a responsibility to do so. But those are byproducts of the audit itself. The purpose of the audit is to express opinions on the financial statements. In the second paragraph on page 21, we highlight management's responsibilities for the financial statements, and that would include the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements in accordance with GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. It also includes the internal controls over that preparation and fair presentation. Our responsibility, as I've said at least twice now already, is to express opinions on the financial statements based on our audit. And in the third paragraph on page 21, we express our opinions on the financial statements where it reads, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. That is the important phrase, present fairly in all material respects. That is what we refer to as an unmodified opinion. That is the highest level of assurance that we can provide for a set of financial statements. And to put that into some perspective for you, there are three types of opinions we could express. You have the unmodified opinion. That's what you want to see. We could express a qualified opinion that might read something like, except for capital assets, the financial statements referred to above present fairly. We could express an adverse opinion. The financial statements do not present fairly the financial position of the city. And obviously, you don't want either of those two options. The only other alternative we have would be to disclaim an opinion. We couldn't do enough work to express an opinion on the financial statements, because the records were in such a condition or so forth. But the bottom line is, you have what you want to see as a commission is that unmodified opinion on the financial statements. So that's the goal. On pages 37 through 39 of the bond report, the government-wide financial statements are presented. And government-wide financial statements are prepared once a year for the audit report. It's the only time you see this level of reporting. They are prepared on the full accrual basis of accounting, which means they primarily have a long-term perspective. Page 37 of the bond report and page 2 of the presentation handout, I've included the statement of net position. And the statement of net position is a snapshot as of June 30th, 2019, of your assets, deferred outflows, liabilities, deferred inflows, and the net of all of that is your net position or your equity. And for this financial statement, I've highlighted the governmental activities. You do have your activities are broken down into two types, governmental and business type, for the government-wide financial statements. I will touch on the business type activities in a few minutes because the only business type activity that you have is the water and sewer fund. So we're going to talk about that when we talk about the fund level financial statements. But for the governmental activities, a couple of financial performance indicators that I like to look at are the current ratio and the unrestricted portion of your net position. And as of June 30th, 2019, your current ratio is 3.9. So you could cover your current obligations almost 4 times over with what you have on hand in current financial resources. So again, the financial statement has a long-term perspective, but you can pull some current information from it. The other area that I like to look at is the unrestricted portion of your net position, and as of June 30th, 2019, it was actually negative, and is actually about negative $16 million. The reason for that negative is because you are required to recognize your net pension liability and the net OPEB liability, your retiree health care, on the full accrual basis of accounting in these government-wide statements. So, you've got almost $22 million of liability that are recognized for the governmental activities, and that's why your net position is a negative $16 million. One of the things that we did do, I'll touch on this now, one of the things that came out as a result of the audit was the net pension liability and net OPEB liability have been allocated between the governmental activities and the business type activities. Previously, they were just reported in the governmental activities, so we restated net position because you do have employees that work out of the water and sewer fund, and they should recognize a portion of those liabilities as well. That fund should recognize a portion of those liabilities. So we did restate the beginning that position, and that'll be reflected in a few of the charts and graphs that I have in here. The other statement, it's not in your handout, but it is in the bound report, obviously, is the statement of activities. It's a little backwards, and I highlight it here. It starts with expenses. In the left-hand column, it reads left to right. You add in your program revenues, and to come up to a net revenue or net expense in the right-hand column. And as you read down the page, you add back in your general revenues. And what that really highlights is the fact that governmental activities rely very heavily on general revenues, because general revenues, by definition, include your property taxes and your state shared revenue and interest and so forth. They aren't tied to any particular program. But the result for the year is the city improved net position for governmental activities by $654,000 and improved net position for the business type activities by about $430,000. So a positive year in terms of activity on the full accrual basis of accounting. And then we get into the governmental funds. And so this is another set of financial statements prepared on another basis of accounting. Governmental fund financial statements would include your general fund, special revenue, debt service funds, and capital project funds. And these are presented on pages 40 and 42 of the bound report. This is pages 3 and 4 of the presentation handout. And on page 40, or page 3 of the presentation handout, we have the balance sheet. And the balance sheet is, again, a snapshot as of June 30th, 2019. But governmental funds are prepared on the modified accrual basis of accounting, so they have a current financial resources focus. This should be a more familiar presentation for you because this is the level at which your budgets are prepared, and the interim reporting that you get throughout the year is done at the fund level. So the general fund on page 3 of the presentation handout in the left-hand column, I tend to focus on this fund because it's your operating fund, and I've highlighted a couple of things here. Your total fund balance as of June 30th is the second number from the bottom. It's about $3.3 million. It's on the screen there as well. That total is broken down into 5 classifications of fund balance. Your general fund only happens to have 4 of those as of June 30th, 2019. You've got non-spendable fund balance of $80,000, restricted fund balance of $301,000, committed of $1.2 million, and then unassigned fund balance of $1.6 million. Well, that unassigned portion of fund balance is what you have available for future use. It's without restriction. You can spend it on whatever you'd like to spend it on. I compare that $1.6 million to your expenditures plus your other financing uses or your transfers out to other funds. When you compare those two numbers, that unassigned fund balance represents approximately 20% of your annual expenditures and other financing uses. The Government Finance Officers Association recommends that you maintain a minimum fund balance in your general fund that is equal to 2 months of what they call normal operations. And 2 out of 12 months is about 17%. So you're above the minimum recommendation. I don't think that 20% is excessive. I think it's healthy. A little higher would be better. If you include your budget stabilization funds, you'd be at 36%. So again, very stable, very sound general fund balance as of June 30th, 2019. I have a 5-year bar graph here that gives you a visual perspective of the general fund trends here. On page 4 of the presentation handout, I've got the actual statement. The numbers would be too small to put it in the slides, but total revenue for the general fund is just over $8 million. That was an increase of about 6% over the 2018 revenues. Expenditures, also an increase of about 10%. They totaled about $5.8 million for the year. So the activity is up a little bit. Both revenues and expenditures have increased from 2018 to 2019, but you still were able to add to your fund balance. You added $135,612 to your total fund balance, which is the yellow bar there on the graph. So again, a visual perspective, the last 4 years have been increasing in activity. 2015 is the flood. So that's why that spiked out in 2015. And then a couple of pie charts here that detail the composition of your general fund revenues and expenditures. A visual perspective, this is how important property taxes are to you. 77% of your budget comes from property taxes in the general fund. On the expenditure side, the largest use of funds for the general fund is public safety at 42%. Second largest is transfers out to other funds at 27%. And significant transfers would include transfers to the Capital Projects Fund and the Local Street Fund for 2019. So it has to add up to 100%, but those are your big pieces of the budget for 2019. This is a line graph in terms of percentages of your general fund unassigned fund balance compared to expenditures and other financing uses. This does not include your budget stabilization dollars, but it does give you, again, a visual perspective of the last 5 years. And you ended 2019 at 20%, so again, very healthy, very stable. This line graph is in terms of dollars, and the blue line is the actual unassigned fund balance compared to expenditures, and that brownish color, red, whatever color that line is 17% of your expenditures for each of those years. So again, it gives you some comparison there between the GFOA's recommended minimum and where you're actually at. Then on pages 44 through 46, the proprietary funds are presented, and this would include your water and sewer fund as the business type activity. So the information that's included on these pages is identical to what we saw on the government-wide financial statements. It's just a different format. And a couple of highlights here. This is page 8 of the presentation handout. The proprietary funds are prepared on the full accrual basis of accounting, so just like the government-wide financial statements. So they're different than governmental funds. Proprietary funds should set rates that are high enough or sufficient enough to cover the costs of the operations for the water and sewer. The statement of net position is again a snapshot as of June 30th, 2019. And again, I've highlighted my favorite ratios, right? One being the current ratio. Your current ratio is 32.4 as of June 30th, 2019. So that's very high, very healthy. The unrestricted portion of your net position was $546,000. Now, again, this is a bit lower than it was for June 30, 2018, because we restated the net pension liability and the net OPEB liability to allocate some of that to the water and sewer fund. So that $546,000 compared to your operating expenses, factoring out depreciation, because depreciation is not a cash expense, that $546,000 only represents about 23% of your operating expenses. So that's relatively low. You can't really use the same 17% threshold that the general fund uses because you need your system. So there are other factors here. You should start with the 17% as a recommended minimum, but then add to that recommended minimum any principal payments that you might make in the future. Now, currently you don't have any debt in this fund. But then also a percentage of your capital assets, and that's really going to depend on the condition and age of your systems. So how much of your capital assets do you anticipate will need to be replaced in the near future? Is that 5%? Is it 10%? So I don't have a rule of thumb where we can say 2 months worth of operations. It's going to be 2 months plus whatever anticipated capital asset needs you have down the road. This is a 5-year bar graph. Again, this is just the water and sewer fund. Operating revenues for the year were $2.8 million. You also had transfers in of about $223,000 for 2019. So overall, your total revenue and transfers in was a little bit higher than 2018. Your expenditures were about the same. The operating expenses were down about 1%, and your transfers out were pretty close to 2018. So the blue and the maroon bars are relatively close to 2018. But because of the restatement of the beginning net position, that total equity or total net position line did decrease, that yellow bar. So that's why this graph looks a little skewed, is because of the allocation of those net pension and OPEB liabilities. The results for the year, for the activity anyway, your revenues did exceed your expenses. So the activity did increase the total net position. But with the restatement, again, it looks a little skewed. This bar graph is just the net position total broken down into its components of the amount invested in capital assets and then the unrestricted amounts. So the amount invested in capital is the brownish red color, and then the The unrestricted portion is the blue portion of the bar. And the line graph that compares that operating expenses less depreciation, net position to the operating expenses less depreciation. We do see that decline, but again, that's because of the restatement of the liabilities for that fund. I went through that very quickly, but if you have any questions on the financial statements, I'd be happy to answer those. Or should I keep going?
Why don't you go ahead and keep going?
Okay. All right. The last few pages of the presentation packet include our independent auditor's report on internal control. This is our letter of comments and recommendations. And when we came in, Tim asked us to kind of to be rough on them, and maybe we were a little too rough. But we have some comments here, some recommendations for some improvements in internal control. But mostly, most of these recommendations revolve around documenting, review, and approval. Writing the signatures or initials on invoices and so forth. We have a saying that if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. So when we go to test something, test transactions, we're looking for that documented approval. And in several of these areas, it very well may have been done, but how do we know unless it's documented? So that's what most of these are. The first comment is on material journal entries. We did have some audit adjustments as part of the audit process. And those would be to depreciation, the net pension liability, OPEB, and then the related deferred inflows and outflows related to the net pension and the net OPEB liabilities. But pretty much the rest of it is just documenting your controls. So that was what I had to present. Again, I just wanted to hit the high level summary. I went through that, like I said, very quickly, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. On some of these suggestions on internal controls, like bank reconciliations and payroll internal controls, are we going to implement those?
A lot of them we already have. It's just
already
sign-off type sheets, so we've already implemented a number of these.
Okay.
The other ones we plan to do so.
Great.
Yeah, but there are going to be all kinds of controls on your salary.
Yes, the $1 a year. Make sure we get that payroll
Yeah,
right.
did you pay that this
I
year?
didn't actually.
Oh, okay. Write that down.
Write that down. Yes.
That should be audited.
Let's take a motion first on accepting the financial statements here.
So move. Second.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Jenks, seconded by Commissioner Olsman. Any members of the public have any questions on the financial statements? Seeing no hands. Commissioners with questions on the financial statements? Nothing? Okay. Thank you very much for your work. I did receive an email from your firm as an elected official. I guess I was randomly drawn.
Yep. Lucky you.
Lucky me, right, to respond to some questions. And that's the first time that's happened in my tenure on here. So I did appreciate you reaching out to a member of the elected body for feedback as well. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. All right. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Appreciate your work. All right, next item is item number 3, matter of authorizing the allocation of the 2020 Cdbg funding. Let's get a motion on the floor for this item first.
Seconded.
Moved by Commissioner Jenks, seconded by Commissioner Elder. Amy, do you want to give an explanation?
This year, we're going to allocate the 30%, which is the maximum that we can allocate to, again, offset some of the costs for providing transportation for the seniors. And the rest of it, we plan to use to remove architectural barriers, which is a fancy way of saying making the bathrooms handicap accessible at the Recreation Center and the library. We've already done that here at City Hall, so we're going to do those last 2 buildings with these funds.
Okay, great. Any questions or comments from the public? Seeing no hands, commissioners, questions or comments? All right, so we're allocating $2,639 to transportation and driver wages, $6,158 to the removal of architectural barriers. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda is item number 4. Item number 4. It's a matter of consideration to approve the 2020-2021 latchkey rate increase request. Can we get a motion on the floor for this item?
I will motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Elder, seconded by Commissioner Jenks. Amy or Mary, do you want to cover this item?
Most of these items were recommendations from the Long Range Budget Committee. You may recall that last summer rates, or spring, I guess, rates were increased as per their recommendation for this particular school year. And then we are going to be implementing some of their suggestions for the 2021 school year. For example, we did have different rates depending on when you picked your child up from latchkey. So now there's just going to be one rate across the board. I missed anything?
No, that's pretty much it. Just a small increase in percentage to keep in the rate with the Berkeley School District also.
Keeps us in line with them. All right, great. Any members of the public? Any questions on this item? Okay. Commissioners with questions, comments?
I have a comment.
All right, Commissioner Elder.
This makes a lot of sense to bring it up to speed with the other latchkey programs around us, and I think I've said this before, having so many choices between a 4:30 pickup and a 6 o'clock pickup, it just let's simplify it. And I like this recommendation as a parent who uses latchkey. It'll make the forms better, but more importantly, puts our city in a much better position with this program. Right.
I agree with Commissioner Elder's comments. It seemed like there was maybe some negligible savings between 4 p.m. pickup and a 6 p.m. pickup, and it gets confused, what time were you there? So I think this really does simplify it, and more importantly, since we're providing this program, we're now in line with the rest of the school district, and I think that's important. Any other commissioners with comments?
Strictly a question.
All right, Commissioner Jenks.
With this adjustment, we are in line with the Berkeley schools.
Yeah, we're running ours they run theirs a little bit different in that you're.
Mary, can we have you come up so you're picked up on the mic? Thank you.
Sure, yeah. No, we're not opting to go with their policy of requiring a set, once you commit at the beginning of the year, you're committed for the whole year for those days. We're still not at that point. I think with the volume that we have and with going with the one set till 6 o'clock, I think we'll be able to reach the numbers we're looking at. And they also, if you select 5 days a week, well, it's varied what you pay. It's reduced if you do 5 days a week. We have one set. It doesn't matter if you use it 5 days a week. It's going to be the same amount you're going to be paying.
Oh,
so I
great.
think
So it's
with the way we're doing it, it'll balance out with the way Berkeley's doing it.
Great.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Additional questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Mary. Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is item number 5. This is a matter of receiving and filing the Planning Commission's annual report. This is a statutory requirement. I'll look for a motion on this item.
So moved.
Seconded.
All right, moved by Commissioner Jenks, seconded by Commissioner Olsman. Amy, do you want to just give a real brief kind of update on the works of the Planning Commission?
Most of the work that the Planning Commission did, again, was residential site plan reviews. They looked at 15 of them this year. They also did some, there was a correction to the zoning ordinance on accessory structures. There was an amendment to prohibit recreational marijuana businesses. And just at their last meeting, they recommended an amendment to the stormwater management section of the ordinance that will be coming to you shortly, that prohibits the careless use of pollutants getting into our sewer system. And we are expecting to do an update in 2020. So we'll have that added to the list as well as for their accomplishments.
Thank you. I'm currently the Commission's liaison to the Planning Commission, and there was real positive discussion on the pollution control ordinance that'll be coming to us at a subsequent meeting. So it seemed to be positive discussion. So, any members of the public wish to comment on this? Seeing none. Commissioners with anything? All right, those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item, item number 6, matter of consideration of the adoption of an ordinance to amend the City of Huntington Woods Code of Ordinances, Chapter 6, Building and Building Regulations, Article 7, dangerous buildings in its entirety, and to provide penalties for the violation thereof. Can I get a motion on the ordinance? The supplemental one that's been provided, and then we'll take any discussions and amendments to it, just to get it on the table.
You want the original draft on the table?
Yeah, just for the time being.
So moved.
All right.
Seconded.
All right, moved by Commissioner Olsman, seconded by Commissioner Elder. I know that, Carol, you've done a lot of work on this. Do you want to kind of talk us
Just,
through?
Point of information. Is this the original?
That has the one change that was brought up today, the one that's sitting on the table.
Okay.
So is the motion on the one sitting
The
on?
motion's on the original one, and then I think we're going to entertain the amendment as you explain it.
Okay, all right. Well, this sort of all came up when it came to the city commission's attention that there was a vacant structure that's been sitting in the city for some 16 years. And we started looking at what could we do about that structure and started reviewing the dangerous buildings section, and I realized it really was not up to speed, not consistent with state law, and also kind of set forth a process that made it much more difficult to move forward. So we went back, basically scrapped the original ordinance and started over. And this new ordinance follows the state law, the procedure that the state utilizes for condemnation. Instead of going to some type of board, what will happen is the city manager will select a hearing officer. And it first goes to the hearing officer. Hearing officer will then take the evidence and issue an opinion on it. They can appeal to the city commission on that. And then depending on what the city commission does, they can also appeal to circuit court. But it's a much faster procedure than trying to, file litigation in circuit court, arguing that you have a public nuisance or something like that. Otherwise, I don't know. Maybe just specific questions that you might have on it.
Okay. Commissioner Olsman, I know you had proposed some changes, and I know that we have a copy here that's been presented that incorporated one of the changes.
Yeah.
And so, does anybody from the public have any questions on this item at this point? All right, seeing no hands, members of the commission?
No, in reviewing it, I had 3 areas. I see we went with 1 out of 3, which is okay. I mean, I defer to my friend Carol Rosati on this. I just like these ordinances to be more encompassing in terms of who you can deal with, if you will. The word owner seems encompassing, but then you may find out that the owner of the property whose name is on the title may not be the person who has the economic control of the property, the ability to go in, so for whatever reason. But I understand if we're tracking state law, then that's fine.
And I guess the other point on that is when we actually start a dangerous building proceeding, before I do that, I first do a title search. And anybody that shows up having any kind of interest on the property, they're automatically notified of the hearing as well. So any mortgage company, any Joe Blow that put a lien on.
Well, that's the goal.
So they're hopefully in the background helping us because they will potentially lose their interest as well. So.
Well, and just to refresh the record, if you will, this came about as a result of the discussion of the house that the neighbors, residents came in and advised us that they had seen rodents and other matters, and we still would like to try to get a warrant from the court to go into the house and conduct an inspection of the inside.
Well, an update on that. We do have the paperwork prepared, ran it by Hank today. There's a few edits that have to be made. Those will be made tomorrow, and then we'll get the signatures and go into court and see if the court will issue a
Well, my understanding was
search
that with the supporting affidavit, the court had indicated it might be more inclined to.
We have actually 3 affidavits that'll go along with it.
All right, well, that's good.
And
the goal of that, again, just to be fair to everybody, is to just be sure that it's not a hazardous situation in the house. You can look through the windows and stuff, but one of the questions was what happened following the 2014 flood? What did they do? Was it cleaned up? Is there mold? We don't know, but we'll find out. And obviously, we don't have a willing partner in the owner of the property, who, as I understand it, lives in Montana and is not interested in having a dialogue with the city of Huntington Woods.
Correct.
And I think there was a structural issue with the garage too that was concerning the residents as to the stability of that structure and the danger that it posed as well.
And to this
It's gonna
point,
fall down.
we did receive an administrative search warrant for the garage before. Structural engineer did determine it was dangerous. In the event we cannot get a search warrant for the house, if the judge deems the affidavits to not have sufficient cause to issue, we'll in the meantime go ahead and proceed with the demolition of the garage.
Okay.
So we'll at least start that.
Great.
But we're hoping that there's enough information in the affidavit for the judge to let us enter.
Commissioner Olsenmer, will you amend your motion to include the one revision that is presented?
Yes, to amend the paragraph 8. This is of section 6, 183, paragraph 8 on page 2. The paragraph reads: a building or structure used or intended to be used for dwelling purposes, including the adjoining grounds, because of dilapidation, decay, damage, faulty construction, or arrangement, as hazardous mold or environmental conditions deemed to be a health hazard, is unsanitary or unfit for human habitation, or otherwise is in a, maybe check the wording on that, Ms. Rosati, is in a condition that the building official of the city or the Oakland County Health Department determines is likely to cause sickness or disease, or is likely to injure the health, safety, or general welfare of people living in the dwelling. So
we're going to strike the word has, I think.
yeah, I think we got a wrong word there.
Otherwise,
yeah.
It's, yeah. Okay.
But the my addition was of the mold or environmental conditions, just because there's so many things now that would be considered that years ago were never.
Sure. And Commissioner Elder, you're in agreement with that, correct? The
Yes.
amendment to the motion? Okay. So this is the version here, and I know just for the public's benefit, we have a policy, it's not required by charter, that we typically do a first and then a second reading, but because we feel this is of an urgent public health concern, we are going to waive the requirement for a second reading, and this ordinance will be adopted this evening and then take effect upon the necessary required publication from the city clerk and whatever is required by charter. Any questions or comments from any commissioners on this? Okay, hearing none, those in favor of adopting the ordinance will signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is our city manager's report.
A couple of comments from our departments. First, from Recreation, the construction on the new play area at Peasley Park is complete. I know I drive by it every morning, and it looks like a really entertaining space. So check it out. Peasley Park is the park that's located on Coolidge between Balfour and Winchester. The library asked me to let residents know that Matthew Ball, the Boogie Woogie Kid, is coming to the library on December 11th at 7 p.m. He performs a family-friendly program of boogie, blues, ragtime, and song favorites from the swing era, 20s, 30s, and 40s. Something for all ages. Register online at the library's website. Seems like we had a special meeting in the basement of the library one day while he was playing in the other room. It's entertaining. And lastly, Just an update on the copper and lead rules. We have been encouraging residents to call the Department of Public Works if they want to know if their service line is lead or some other material. So far, the DPW has visited 51 homes. None of them have had lead service lines, and there are 9 more appointments this week. So again, if anybody wants to just get some double check and reassurance on that, call our Department of Public Works. We'll schedule an appointment and be happy to go out and take a look at it.
And the residents are also, I know some of them have mentioned to me they've taken advantage of the testing program we offer and sent a water sample in, and they're able to take advantage of that if they want.
Yes,
to
we'll do
test
that
it
at the same
internally.
time.
Yeah,
We'll
that's
take a
great.
water sample when we look at the service line.
That's
There is a $23 fee.
Right.
So if they don't have a lead service line,
They may not opt for that.
Right.
Any commissioners with questions of the city manager? All right, hearing none, thank you for that report. I'll look for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Seconded, so we have a motion by Commissioner Elder, seconded by Commissioner Olsman to adjourn the meeting. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We're declared adjourned at 8:17 p.m.
Very efficient.
Nice job, Joe.